Hey, how's it going everyone? Today we're talking about something pretty exciting. This is the Panasonic Lumix S5. Now, I've had my hands on this for the last couple of weeks, but today it's been announced and I'm finally able to talk about it and share my thoughts. So the camera industry is on fire right now. There are so many new cameras coming out from Canon, Sony. This is Panasonic's entry and we're still waiting to hear what other brands are going to do. For me personally, I'm so interested in testing out multiple different cameras and really getting a feel for the industry and then sharing it with you guys. That is one of the benefits of having this channel, is I'm able to get these first hands-on looks and I want to share my honest thoughts with those. Now, I've personally been shooting with Panasonic for the last 3 years or so. I've been using the GH5 as my main workhorse, and I built up a little bit of a casual relationship with Panasonic, and they've kindly lent me the S1H and now the S5, and I've been able to get my thoughts around them as a system. So with this video, we're going to be talking through some of the usability aspects of this, which is my favorite thing to talk about with cameras. A little top line on some of the specs, but mostly I am going to be focusing from a video perspective. So Panasonic are marketing this as an entry-level camera into their S series lineup. I actually think you shouldn't lump in the word entry-level to it, because this camera can actually perform so much more than other entry-level cameras. So the first thing that I want to load your thoughts with is this is a camera that is below £2,000. So I'm always open to seeing what the camera brands are releasing, and when Panasonic first reached out to see if I was interested in seeing what they were working on, I've got to be honest, I was really expecting an upgrade to the GH line. I thought there was going to be a successor to the GH5 and GH5S. When they showed me the S5 and they started running through some of the specs, I was genuinely really surprised by it. So this is a full-frame camera that is both smaller and lighter than the GH5. Now internally we've got almost the same lineup of video features as the GH5, and of course that main characteristic that I personally love about Panasonic, which is the reliability factor. All the 10-bit flavors in both 4K, 25 or 30 or 50 or 60 frames a second, and then in the high frame rate modes they are still 1080, much the same as they are on the GH5. But remember, this is now a full frame sensor that we're talking about, and it's got dual native ISO, which is great for low light performance. And of course, with this being a Panasonic, when we're talking about the video features, there is so much in here that is tailored towards the filmmaker. All of those video assists, the customization that you can do to your picture, the really fine granular detail you can do for a filmmaker. All of that control and usability is built into here, as we've come to know and expect of Panasonic. So in many ways, this camera actually is the upgrade to the GH5 that I've been waiting for. And I guess some of the features of it genuinely are a big surprise to me. So I always thought there were three major things that were a bit of a ceiling to me with the GH5. The first of which was the low light performance. Now I know the GH5S solved some of those issues and created a great low light camera, but it lost that inbuilt image stabilization. This of course has that. Second of which, with the GH5 being a micro four thirds sensor, the depth of field was nowhere near as shallow as what you get on DSLRs and full frame cameras. That's, potentially an opinion piece. This, of course, being a full-frame camera, does solve that. And then the third point was always the autofocus. The GH5 was just never very good at autofocus, and I learned how to tame it. Now, Panasonic have claimed that they've solved a lot of those issues and they've improved on it greatly, and I've been testing it out and I've got some thoughts on it, but more on that in a moment. So, let's talk about usability. And of course, right now, I am now filming this on the Lumix S5. And I'm using the 20-60 lens. There's actually going to be a kit model of this, I believe. And I think that collectively with the camera is what puts it around £2,000. Also right now I'm shooting in AF continuous. So this should be tracking my face, and as with the firmware updates and just improvements that they've made, I can see that it is much, much better than what it was with my GH5. But unfortunately, I do also know that it's not perfect. In comparison to the competition, it's really not there. See, the focus is better that it tracks the back of your head when you turn. So it does a good job of that. Just come walk towards me. All right, we're gonna do an autofocus test. the box is tracking it. There we go. All right, so it's found your eye, found your face. Colors look lovely. You look lovely. And just walk over there again. Oh wait, no, come back. And that's how you do an autofocus test. So first and foremost, when you hold the camera, usability comes down to the size and weight and the design of the body. Honestly, it genuinely surprises me how they're able to produce a camera that is smaller and lighter than the GH5. Now granted, the GH5 was a particularly large camera anyway, especially considering it had a micro four thirds sensor, but it always felt comfortable and it was great ergonomically. This has a slightly different design language to the sort of ergonomics of it, but it's still pretty comfortable to hold, and especially with it being lighter. So there are some factors to this camera that you can see how Panasonic have called this an entry level, and you can see where they've potentially cut a few corners to make it cheaper. And one of which I find a little bit disappointing is actually the EVF. So this has a smaller EVF at a lower resolution than what was on the GH5. And I've grown to realize that I actually shoot, when I'm filming video, I probably shoot around 80% through the EVF. I find it adds so much more stability when you've got it close to your face, but also in bright conditions you can just see everything. There are so many benefits to using the EVF for video. And having a smaller and lower resolution, I really do notice it. Especially considering I've been using the S1H a lot recently, and that is by far one of the best EVFs around. So unfortunately, the EVF design is probably the biggest downside I've found about using this camera. The screen size is also a little bit smaller than the GH5, but that hasn't really been too much of a problem for me. And I like that it's brought with it some of the video-centric features from the S1H, such as the frame markers and the ability to see your record frame. There are a lot of features on here that have been slight improvements over the years from that original GH5. I know I keep talking about this in comparison to the GH5. You could also look at this as maybe a baby S1H, but to be honest, I really do see those as two separate cameras. This S5 could be a B cam to an S1H system if you're using that for production work. There will be some firmware updates to this that will bring things like ProRes RAW and a few other things, but for the most part I see this as a GH5 upgrade. Now I don't know if Panasonic are going to be upgrading the micro four thirds anymore. I imagine they are still going to support it. I'm just calling it an upgrade because that's what's available right now at the time of filming. So as I keep comparing it to my GH5, it really does solve a lot of the issues and sort of drawbacks that I had with it. Most notably, I think, is the low light performance. So with the dual native ISO, and it's not as customizable as it is on the S1H, it does it in like an auto mode. That does mean that the low light performance is pretty great. I tested it a little bit at home and done some inside shots, and I was genuinely surprised with it. But unfortunately, the autofocus really has become a bit of an issue here. And even though this camera is very customizable and you can do all of the picture adjustments, you can make all of these tweaks and differences to really tailor how you want the image to look. Being an independent shooter, I really do rely on autofocus a lot for some of my videos and work, and knowing that the competition out there has such a better system really makes this a bit of a drawback for the autofocus. As for the picture profiles and picture adjustments, they're all the same as what you know from previous Panasonic cameras. And of course we have Vlog, the full Vlog built in. There's no paid upgrade like it was on the GH5. I personally prefer to shoot in a modified version of Cinelight D. I feel like it's flat enough to give me some flexibility in grading, but it's not too flat that it actually just becomes troublesome in post-production. You can even add in LUTs as a viewing assist on here on the camera, so you can see how your finished look will look in camera. Again, having all of these features and functionality, yes, you can do that. But do I really utilize all of those? Probably not, but it's nice to have the flexibility depending on the type of user that you are. For this part, I'm now going to do my little hack that I've done on my GH5 for the last year or so, which is switching it to AF single shot and pre-focusing. I find that that gives a far more stable picture in terms of its focus. There's no hunting and whatever, and you're able to really appreciate the full picture quality. So of course with Panasonic, and this S5 is no different, I always think to them as video focused cameras. You can use them for photography. I personally just haven't tested it all too much, but another channel that I would recommend if you want to see some Lumix photography is James Popsey's. I think he may have the S5, I'm not sure, but go and check out his channel if you want to get to know what Lumix is more like for photography. He's got some great videos and some great images as well. Alright, so my final thoughts on this Panasonic S5. I think this is a fantastic camera. I think it's a huge upgrade if you're coming from something like a GH5 or a GH5S. The picture quality you get from it is very technically consistent. Now I must admit, over the years it has taken me quite a lot of time to establish a sort of characteristic and personality to the image out of the Panasonic cameras. I do remember when I first got them, it took quite a lot of work to get the image that I wanted out of it. So I guess my short thoughts on the picture quality is it's technically accurate and it's technically correct, but I do find that sometimes Panasonic just lacks that sort of oomph and sexiness to the character that you get from other brands. And that of course is very opinion based, but I must admit the picture quality from here is fantastic. The dynamic range especially is really great. You may have seen with some of the highlights, I know I'm using an ND filter at the moment, but the quality I am really impressed by. Between this and the S1H though, I think if I was to invest in them, I'd probably still put my money towards an S1H. And I'm in this sort of weird position here where I love the form factor to the S5. I think the smaller factor is great, the size and weight is perfect for me. But I would equally happily pay more money to get a better quality EVF and reduce some of those extra restrictions that are in place, such as the 30-minute record limit. But other than that, all of the other features, they're all there for me. It's just that EVF is a bit of a deal breaker for me. So you have to come down to your own conclusion on this with the price factor. Yes, the S1H is more expensive and you'll be able to use interchangeable lenses between the S5 and the S1H, and yes, this one's cheaper. But are some of those extra flourishes, such as that better quality EVF, worth the money? I feel for me, the better EVF actually offsets the extra size and weight to the S1H. So I'm kind of drawn oddly between the two. So as with all cameras, this does come down to personal preference, and over the years as I've evolved in what I'm filming, I am filming more outwardly and I'm looking to do more of those outward types of productions, and by that I'm using the viewfinder so much more. This would be a perfect vlogging camera. It would offer so much to most vloggers out there. Most people in those scenarios are going to be using the screen, and that is perfectly adequate for that. And it's not like it doesn't have an EVF, it does. It's just I am noticing, because I've experienced those larger, brighter and better EVFs, I do notice this as a setback. And when I think of investing in a camera, I usually want to invest for about 2 to 3 years worth. Could I live with 3 years with this EVF? I'm not sure I could. So my actual final conclusion on the S5 is I think this is a brilliant camera. It offers so much and it delivers on pretty much all aspects for the filmmaker and likely for the photographer as well. All things considered, everything that it can do, it really does punch above its weight, because we have to remember this is an entry-level price point. This is below £2,000 or even $2,000, whichever way you look at it. Everything you get out of this camera for that price point is really going to open doors for the Panasonic S lineup. The lenses and the L-mount alliance is really developing further, and I think this is going to introduce a lot of people to that lineup. Healthy competition between the camera brands is always good for the end user. It allows things to develop further and faster. So I think the introduction of this S5 is actually going to do great for the world of cameras right now. And yeah, let me know what you think about it. If you do decide to get one, then I'd be interested to see your work on it. But otherwise, that's been it, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to catching you in a future video real soon. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you later. Bye bye.